right, everybody. Well, here it is. It's time for some real estate after dark. Now, if you are in the school community, you already know what that means. We're going to get back. We're going to talk about real estate investing. We're going to get a little bit more raw and a little bit less politically correct than if we would be during the day when we have to worry about a lot of other people that would be sitting around and giving any kind of judgment. One of the benefits about this is that you get to get off work and maybe you've got everybody else taken care of and now you get to take care of yourself. So maybe you've poured yourself a little drink, your beverage of choice, and you're just sitting back and looking for something besides just the same news that you want to run into every single day. This is where we're going to talk about real estate. We talk about real estate investing, some of the strategies that we have, some of the challenges that we have. And time to time, I bring people on to talk about some of the things in real estate investing and what that's done for them. So tonight, we've actually got a guy named Ryan that I met him, shoot, probably 8, 10 months ago. And we lived in the same neighborhood before we moved. And he actually, I didn't know that he was a real estate investor until he introduced himself to me. And we kind of had a nice little chat about some things. But just recently, I've realized that he started back at the age of 17. And I'm going to let him talk about that story and what that was like. But one thing that I really respect about him is that he's kind of raw and vulnerable in sharing that story because so many people they like to have this polished look and they're afraid to be authentically themselves. So starting out with a personal loan to buy his first property, which was going to be a fix and flip, he turned that passion for real estate into just a thriving career. And over the years, he's built a successful portfolio of rentals, flips, other investments, and even launching his own real estate firm up in New York. So he actually cashed all that out, or at least the majority of it. We'll dive into that. And now he's based in Southwest Florida. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring Ryan to the stage right now. And I'm thankful to have you on with us tonight. Ryan, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you. You were breaking up for a second there, but I caught the end of it. I appreciate all those things you said, and I'm happy to be on.
Yeah. Well, I'm bringing my mic a little bit closer to me, so maybe that'll kind of help some of the audio there. So real quick, for anybody that is watching, if you're watching on Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn, or StreamYard or YouTube, I've got the comment section open. So if you have any questions whenever we're going through this, please jump in, ask a question, and if you don't see that your question is being addressed, just reach out to me. I'm sure that you've got my cell phone number, so reach out, text, let me know, and I'm going to try to monitor these comments as we go through everything. So Ryan, if you don't mind, go ahead and you heard my introduction, but please give your own background, your own story.
Yeah, do you want me to go in depth or like a vague
Yeah,
overview?
yeah. Just go ahead and start from whenever it started for you. What brought you
Sure.
into real estate? And it's really interesting hearing that age of 17, some of the decisions that you had to make.
Yeah, so early on, growing up, I was middle class, so my parents weren't rich or anything. I had no idea about real estate investing at all. If I did, I probably would have gotten involved sooner. When I was 17, I was getting into a little bit of trouble. Not the best student, the ADHD and everything. So I didn't want to pay attention in school. So I started kind of getting into trouble, and I got arrested a couple times for some kind of stupid little things that I did as a teenager. And then I was just working a lot. I was working 70, 80 hours a week. As a pizza guy, I was delivering pizza. I was making pizzas, all that, which was good for me. I was making a lot of money, but I knew that wasn't the end goal, of course, and I was still pretty young. So I was working there for quite a while until I was maybe 19, and that's when I started thinking about buying a property. My parents recommended a mobile home to start, which turned out to be a decent idea. Um, I got a personal loan on that. It was really cheap. It was a single wide mobile home. Where I'm from, Buffalo, New York, you could get them for very cheap. So it was like 5 grand. I didn't even have 5 grand. I took out a personal loan to buy the mobile home, and I bought it. I put some carpet in, painted all the walls and the cabinets, and put flooring in, and lived there for a little bit. And then that's kind of when I got involved into real estate. I was actually on a cruise on a vacation, and I met a young guy who seemed successful, and we were kind of drinking, having fun. And I was like, "So tell me about this real estate investing thing." He turned me onto a podcast or two, and I listened to a lot of the podcasts, and I decided I wanted to eventually take action. But I had pretty much no money. I had that personal loan. So what I did over the next 13 months after that is I got a full-time job, a real job, as the kids would say. I was working at an insurance company, so I had income on the books, was making real money, and it was 35K a year, but it was real. It was on the books. So that allowed me to have that established income to be able to eventually get that FHA loan to start investing.
Okay.
While I was saving up, I bought my first property, got licensed as an agent, started accumulating some more properties, quit that job full time, was full time as an agent and investor, got into some flips, bought some more properties, and I've used all kinds of different loan types. And I'd be happy to share and provide value to everyone. There's a lot of BS out there, and I'd like to tell you exactly what it is that you need to do if you want to go from nothing and create a portfolio. So,
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being willing to share that, because you and I seem to have similar backgrounds with that regard of, not coming from a very, wealthy background, and nothing wrong with that. If somebody that's watching this, I don't want you to feel alienated or that, we think we're superior because we started with less. No, good for you. You just, you're ahead of the game, right? We like to help other people where the masses are, and those masses necessarily don't have millions of dollars to start. So with that $5,000 to kick it up, the least expensive house I've ever picked up was actually a mobile home for $3,000. Aside from one that was given to me in a sub two. But I've got to say that for that, mobile homes are really hard to beat whenever you're starting out and you have a low cash position to really invest with. So did you have to, at any point, were you over there swinging the hammers and turning the screwdrivers and doing a lot of the work yourself?
of course, did everything myself. That's how I started to learn how to do this stuff. I had no background in the trade. The only thing I knew how to do was paint, and I could barely do that. Still struggle with it sometimes. It's all learning curve. I accumulated everything on YouTube, and other than that mobile home, I renovated all of my rentals and flips and everything. Very hands-on. Was only able to delegate a small portion of it, so it was pretty much everything was done myself, and I learned as I went.
And what would you say was your biggest challenge as you were working through that? Just I assume that you had the power of YouTube on your side that was kind of helpful with some of the tutorials whenever you're ready to learn that. What was, I guess, one of the things that you wish you would have been prepared for going into it?
Well, I could tell you one time I almost quit investing in real estate. I was like, I'm done. I'm never buying any properties again. This is terrible. And I've actually felt that way several times, as I'm sure you have. There's an issue. So in Buffalo, New York, if people aren't familiar, it's really cold, especially in the winter. There were some issues with the gas line. Apparently had a leak. The tenant didn't pay his gas bill. His gas got shut off. And when they go to turn it back on, they pressure test it. There was a leak somewhere, and I was losing my mind. I had no idea who to call. I was like, this is going to be crazy expensive. And I ended up making a lot of calls. I figured out who to call. It was coincidentally a crackhead, and he went out and he tested for the leak. He knew exactly what he was doing, and charged me $800. He ran a whole new pipe to the unit and got it done.
Okay.
So there's a lot of.
We'll avoid the question of, was that permitted?
Oh, of course not. No, from where I was from, there wasn't a lot of stuff you actually had to pull a permit for. Here in Collier County, it's everything. But They're very lax about stuff up there,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
concerning.
and we've had a similar issue where it was, a tenant smelled gas. They called Centerpoint, which was our local gas company. They come out and they're like, "Yeah, you got a leak somewhere," and they just pulled the meter.
Yep.
So again, we were very new into it, had no idea what to do. Ended up calling a plumber, and plumber was like, "Yeah, pressure test is going to be 350." And I said, "Yeah, 350. All right. Well, it's just you don't know what you don't know." Um, and then come to find out, it was extremely minor. It was a small leak actually with the stove, and I just had to change out a part.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, 350, and the tenant, granted, they were within their rights to call and report a gas leak, but it was so minor that it was a learning lesson. It's kind of
Yeah.
frustrating. Well, let's move into the acquisitions for you. What was that like? I know that initially I was reading through some of your stuff here that you've used FHA loans, owner financing, you've used commercial loans. Um, there's one that really kind of had my curiosity where um, you had a primary live-in flip where you purchased it, I guess, with hard money, and then you lived in it and then you flipped it out. The reason why that caught my attention is because whenever I do any loans for flips, we explicitly, and we've been advised by attorneys, that these have to be non-owner occupied, business to business. So, what was that loan for you? What did that look like?
So it was originally a hard money loan. Ended up refinancing out of it because it was only a year. So it was a
Okay.
year maximum. So we refied out as soon as humanly possible, but it was from a wholesaler, and wholesalers are typically cash only. So I needed the hard money loan to close on it. And then, a few months later, we refied out and lived in there for slightly over 2 years. But that
Well,
one
after
looked.
get the game.
Yeah, we bought it for, I think it was like 92.5 from a wholesaler, 92 grand, and we put a lot of work into it, fixed it up, and then by the time we sold 2 years later, it was like 185. We sold it for, but
Okay.
that one had a whole slew of issues. When you're buying these properties and you're getting good deals, sometimes, to say it frank, you have to eat a Johnson, and you get screwed over a lot. I had to, within the first year, the sewer line collapsed. I tried to go into the crawl space and dig it out myself. Turns out it was one of those clay ones, and it was just destroyed
Oh,
everywhere. So
yeah.
yeah, I had to have a professional plumber do that one. But before even closing on the property, the homeowner stole. They had this huge shed in the backyard. It was Amish shed. It was 12 by 24, big shed. Stole that. Stole the appliances, even though they were in the contract, and then just bounced. And the money was still there. It was still a good deal, so I still had to close on it.
Yeah. And that's one of the frustrations whenever you're helping to solve somebody's problem and they can't see far enough past their own short-sightedness that they're like they don't know that they're really biting the hand that is feeding them or helping them, right?
Yep.
I've had some situations like that before, and it's extremely frustrating whenever you just want to grab them and shake them and say, "Listen, dipshit, I'm trying to help you, and I have every right to walk away from this property right now." You know, but like you said, there's
Yeah.
still meat on the bone. It's still a good deal, so you end up closing.
Yeah.
Now,
That
what would you
house was
say?
particularly
Oh, go ahead.
that house was particularly nasty. The guy had a stroke and couldn't really talk or walk up the stairs or anything. So his dogs were shitting everywhere. He couldn't wipe his own ass. There was shit smeared on the wall. It was
Yeah.
disgusting. But those are some of the things you have to deal with.
Oh, yeah. And the hoarder houses are some of the saddest situations that you deal with because you see just how some people live and you realize like wow, nobody in their right mind or with all of their faculties would actually choose to live like this, right? And after a certain point, whenever you've made like your seventh dumpster load of beer cans or uh, shit, how would you put it delicately, adult diapers or anything else that's just really like wow, why would this be what you hoard, you know
Yeah.
it's hard to sometimes keep I would say compassion for people, with that regard, because you have to grow a certain amount of coldness, to things to get there. And with that, just like, well, I wouldn't say just like that, but first responders, for example, they're known for having some of the darkest senses of humor, and it's a coping mechanism, for the things that
Yeah.
they have to see and the things that they do. So you see some landlords that sound really jaded about things, but it's just that they've had a lot happen to them.
Yeah, and I've become numb to a lot of stuff as well. I've had everything you could imagine. My rentals, most of them were borderline on the hood, suburbia hood, and it just kept getting worse. And the tenant pool kept pulling from the bad areas, and I was just experiencing more and more like issues with the tenants and the properties. And it's a lot to be a self managing landlord, and if you turn it over to
Yeah.
property management, that's sometimes even harder because you got to manage the manager, and they're not doing their job, and
Yeah.
it can get stressful.
Well, how many at one point, or what would you say your highest amount of rental properties were at one point in your career?
I didn't have a ton. I had probably at one time 14 units, so it wasn't a
14
ton.
still healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good for a young 20s guy that's just trying to build up the portfolio. But I got to a point where it didn't matter. I was like, I don't care if I'm a multimillionaire. I don't want to live here. I like we have to leave. It's the best thing for our family. It's just so terrible living in a place where you don't want to live. The weather's bad. The people are bad. You can't prosper. You're kind of always going to be dragged down. So you really have to go somewhere if you're in that position where you can improve your life.
Well, and we'll get to that part here shortly as well. But going back to some of the worst things that you dealt with, you know, I've been vocal about this before. We've actually had a murder in one of our properties, and it was really kind of, in a way, it was shocking, but also in a way not really shocking because, you know, with a long enough timeline, something's going to happen, you know. And sadly, whenever you're in the C class, D class, and it happens even in A class properties, right? So we tell people nobody is exempt from having a murder in one of their properties. But what would you say, without getting too explicit, was probably the worst thing that happened to you or one of your properties while you were in that business?
I'd say the worst thing isn't necessarily the stuff that happens to the property, but dealing with the difficult tenants is the worst. When you're in a state that's not landlord friendly, like New York and especially Buffalo, New York, it's very, very blue. So the tenants have so many rights beyond what even the landlord has. It's so hard to take possession of your property. If they're destroying it, they could have a meth lab there, and there's nothing you can do a lot of times. So it's really hard. Managing the tenants is the hardest. But I had a commercial tenant in my mixed use building. She on her way out finally got her out after 3 years. She knocked down all the walls, ripped up all the floors. I had her husband arrested on felony charges for doing all the demo. So there's just you're constantly dealing with stuff. There's a tenant that apparently his toilet didn't work for 3 months and he never told me. There was just a clog, and he never told me. I talked to him weekly. He was worked at the appliance store where I got a lot of appliances from. Um, he never told me. He was afraid that it would cost me like $50 to have a plumber come out and snake it. But it was
Wow.
just piled with. It was just disgusting. And he was living like that. So dealing with people, you never know what's going to happen, and I've seen it all.
So, all right, so let's talk about that. And we've always, thankfully, we started in Louisiana, which is a very landlord friendly state. Our evictions, whenever we heard about, I had a guy from California call me one time for a consult. So, I explained to him, I was like, hey, look, it's going to be this much for an hour, but, he's like, no, I'll pay it. Let's go. So we get on the phone and he starts explaining to me the eviction process in San Francisco. And I'm just like, dude, this is ridiculous. Why would anybody spend money to buy properties to where you are so disadvantaged at reclaiming possession of your property when somebody defaults? And like New York, of course, I don't know many investors that haven't heard the horror stories up there. And you just said 3 years. So it took somebody, was this during the eviction moratorium from COVID and everything? So they were able to milk this process for 3 years?
Well, that tenant specifically had a long lease from so I inherited her as a tenant, so she had a long lease. It was just kind of waiting for that to expire, but it was every month she was like, "Oh, I can't pay this month. There's a leak," and I said, "Did you tell me about the leak?" She said, "No." I said, "I want to come in and fix it." "Oh, well, you can't because there's an alarm on the property and it wakes the neighbors. You just can't." So you can't even go in without the permission to fix something. So that was really hard. But I was pretty lucky during COVID where I didn't get screwed over like a lot of landlords did. I was very I tried to be personable with my tenants and didn't raise rent during COVID, of course, because that would have been a really bad idea. But I did have my next door neighbor where I was house hacking. Um, his tenant, he lived in a duplex, but his tenant didn't pay for 18 months. Nothing he could do. Lived there for free, and then the government paid him after 18 months.
Wow.
So the tenant
Well,
never was.
yeah.
It was. It's just crazy. The amount of leeway that the tenants have in a blue state is wild to me.
And what would you say outside of, COVID, if that wasn't the thing, is it true that some of the evictions can take literally 6 months from whenever you file your eviction to even get in front of a judge before a tenant would do anything like that would request a stay of
Yeah,
the eviction or anything?
very true. If you do everything perfectly, I kept one property up there, but if you do everything perfectly, you can have the tenant out in 3 months if it goes perfectly smooth. And that's
Wow.
that's if they do something egregious. They could be just not paying. They could be harboring fugitives. They could be smoking crack. It doesn't matter. They could have a
Yeah.
dog count. You know, that it's insane. But luckily, I never really had to deal with anything too crazy. Um, my technique was I would, you always got to find a way around the rules a little bit sometimes in real estate. But my thing was, and this wasn't against the rules, but the second a tenant was late, at the 5 day mark, they'd get their late fee, and then I would file a small claim against them. Because if they end up not paying, then by the time that 45 to 60 days comes up, I can take them to small claims court, get it at least, get a judgment and get them out quicker.
Yeah.
So I was very, very on top of the small claims, and that letter really scares people a lot. So getting that letter
Wow.
saying that, here's a small claim, you're going to court. It's pretty intimidating for a lot of people.
And Ryan, that's just a difference of, like, I guess, investing locations, because in our experience, we've had a number of tenants that they're like, "If evict me, I'm not going to pay." We're like, "All right, great. See you in 3 weeks." And our eviction process, typically is 3 weeks from filing. And we would go in there, and we've got just this very standard way of doing things, that rent's due on the first, and on the fifth, if you haven't paid by the fifth, on the sixth or the first business day thereafter, we file eviction. And it's to start the process, simply because if that's the case and you haven't communicated with us, you haven't let us know to make payment arrangements or anything else, then we're going to go ahead and expedite this process, try to get it going. And
Yeah.
you know, to hear that it takes 3 months if everything goes smoothly, to me, all I'm thinking of is, all right, we already allocate typically 5 to 10% of the rent monthly to vacancy. But that being the case, I mean, you're at 25% vacancy, just right there for non-paying, non-performing. And
Yeah.
I, I, I'm not saying, and everybody knows this is not legal or tax advice, so y'all do not take this that way. But I've seen landlords where they would go and they would take the doors off of their properties, and say, "Hey, look, yep, just got to get it maintained." And
Mhm.
of course, that opens you up to a whole plethora of lawsuits and other issues, right? But
Oh yeah.
you see where people in desperation to try to get possession of the property or anything else, they make really bad decisions, in doing these things because they know that if that property stays non-performing, kind of like, whenever you had to evict somebody going through for 6 months, hell,
Mhm.
you're making that mortgage. And, it's not like you're just sitting back on Scrooge McDuck piles of money. You're out here
Yeah.
trying to grind and make it work you know so whenever they do that to you, it's now you're swinging and you have to come up with $1,000, $2,000 more this month just to fade the mortgage that's not being paid you know and you extrapolate that across 5 properties, and now how are you coming up with an extra 10 grand a month to fade mortgages whenever tenants are just in that mood of, no, we're not going to pay. So
Yeah.
I
My
appreciate you
thought
sharing that and being transparent.
Yeah, my thought behind it was if something happened, let's say during COVID, all the tenants stopped paying, I couldn't get any of them out. I would just have to work really hard and hustle really
Yeah,
hard and make some money and
yeah,
pay the mortgage, hold it over, and so that's kind of why I never overextended myself, but I got close a few times. But I've never put myself in a really bad position. My first property, it was house hacking a 4 unit. So worst case scenario, I could cover the mortgage was like $1,100 a month. I could cover that, you know.
yeah.
So excuse me. So that's kind of my mindset behind it. Some people want to scale even faster. I took it
Yeah.
slow.
Well, and what I'm hearing from you as well is that you didn't over leverage, and we probably both saw a lot of investors that advocated for the max cash out refi strategy, right? If the bank's going to give you 80%, then you're going to take every dime of it. And um, that didn't work out so well when the eviction moratoriums came in place. There's a number of investors that we know back in Louisiana that there's a few of them that just got wiped out, but there's a number of them that it got cut really close. So it's important to not over leverage yourself. So you're dropping some really good information here. Um, but I'd like to kind of pivot, and earlier Catherine had asked this. I don't know if you're seeing the comments on your side or not. She's asking what made you decide to cash out, and did you 1031 that or just pay the taxes and go?
Well, a couple of my properties had some deferred maintenance. They were, like I told you, the kind of the bad neighborhood was migrating
Yeah.
more towards the suburbs. The tenant pool was smaller. The good tenants didn't want to live there anymore. Several issues with the properties, so that played a part in it. Excuse me.
Mhm. Yeah. And just a little bit of information for the audience watching. Ryan is a Bills fan, so he was losing his voice yesterday. So I'm just thankful that he was able to get on and talk to us tonight.
Yeah, that's what's happening. It's like scratchy, but so the main reason I probably would have kept them if I was living in the area when I first started investing, I said I would never sell. Why would I sell? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I could just keep rolling them over.
And that's a great
But
point because you buy until you die. So that's why it really caught my eye that you cashed out.
yeah, and we decided to move to Southwest Florida, specifically the neighborhood where we're in. Um, there's a lot of kids. It's very kid friendly, and the sale prices are a lot higher here than they
Yeah.
were in New York. And the weather, the politics, everything worked better for us. That also played a part. So essentially, we just took our least performing properties, sold them, and kept the best performing one that
Okay.
was put together the best, and that's how we did it.
Okay. So it's not that you completely cashed out. You basically took the dogs that were no longer hunting and kind of took that. Now, whenever you sold those, did you take the profit and you rolled it into the balance, or did you just kind of take that as building up a bit of a nest egg for the transition into Florida?
basically rolled it over into the transition into Florida.
Okay.
Selling a couple rentals and the flip house, excuse me, sorry, and our personal residence. That all of that helped with the transition down.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you, anybody that has made the move from anywhere to Florida in the past few years knows that every dime helps. Just because it is unexpected. Especially you coming from New York, where you had, just like me, from Louisiana, where you had an established sphere of influence. You had existing business relationships, all this, and coming down here, it's starting it from scratch. It's a little bit scary, and that's where I would like to, just, well, and Catherine said it right there. Paradise ain't cheap. you know, it's it's so true. But also, if you were talking to somebody in this, on this stream tonight that's watching, and you just wanted to kind of share with them any information that you feel you would have known getting ready to make that move down here, what would you say to yourself a couple years ago?
I think something I may have changed was really trusted myself and bought what I wanted to buy. So when we first moved down, we built a townhome, and that wasn't the move. We moved in 3 months. We didn't like it, but it was time consuming to do all that, to sell it. We bought our house and got two mortgages at the same time.
No.
So that wasn't great within 3 months of moving here. So I would say trust yourself, get what you want to get, and figure out how to pay for it.
Yeah.
Which is probably terrible for the average person.
Hey man, look, I already said the disclaimer, right? This isn't legal or tax advice. So,
Yeah.
It's really funny that you say that, because Catherine and I, when we first moved down here, that was literally the conversation that we had. We were torn, between, all right, do we really splurge and then go for what we want? Or do we go ahead and back off a little bit? We found a property that, we said, all right, we'll turn it over into a rental property, or we'll sell it after a couple of years and we'll move where we really feel settled, at that point. And almost like clockwork, it worked. Now, that being said, we didn't anticipate the market being where it's at right now with the interest rates. So we're facing those kind of, headwinds right now. And to anybody that is moving down here, I would encourage them to, look and see what makes the most sense for you. If that's a townhouse, then go to the townhouse. If it's a brick and mortar, or not brick and mortar, if it's a full on single family home, then go for that. But I've seen a lot of people, kind of like what you said. You thought you wanted this, but whenever you got there, you really wished that you would have just taken that step and figured it out along the way. For Catherine and I, we kind of counter to that. We got lucky in the sense that we didn't, do this back in 22 when we moved, because otherwise we were over there. We were competing with people that were bidding $100,000 above list price, paying cash, right? Waiving appraisals, waiving any other contingencies, no inspections. That's just not us, baby. So we kind of took that more conservative approach and waited a couple of years. But I think that ultimately people just have to do what works for them.
Yeah.
And, being that, you've got the investor mindset, right? And you made it work for you up in New York, moving down here to Florida, what's your goal? Are you looking at kind of acquiring properties down here? Is that even in your interest level? Because, insurance for one, hurricanes, those things, are those any deterrents for you, or are you looking for opportunities to invest in Southwest Florida where your footprint is?
So interestingly, my whole investment strategy when I was up north was cash flow. So I was buying just cash flow. The properties probably weren't going to appreciate too much, but the cash flow would be ridiculous. So that was my whole thing. Down here, I have a whole different ideology. My goal now is to pay off my house and then figure it out from there. So that's my first goal. I have no other payments, no debts other than the mortgage. And it's not how I thought a few years ago, and I don't even know if it's still how I think now. But properties out here, they just don't have the cash flow. The deals aren't good enough yet, so I'm not investing yet here. But I do have some reserves. If something amazing came up, you never know. That's how all the deals for me is something I was ready, something came up, and I jumped on it. So you never know.
I'm with you 100% on that because we also cash flow investors. So to come down here and, take that mindset where we're paying $60,000, $70,000 for a property and it renting out for $1,300, $1,400 a month to spending 500,000 to get 3,000 a month in rent, it's an absolute opposite of the conditioning that I've had over the past almost 10 years now. So, we're right there with you. Now, we're not opposed to a flip, absolutely, because a flip is a flip is a flip, but the strategy change. And Southwest Florida, in my opinion, if you're willing to, only lever, say 60%, 50% debt, on a property, then you can still get some cash flow. But your cash on cash return just isn't really what we're conditioned to getting, you know. And you've got different finance methods that you've used to make those work, and I'd like to hear your take on some of the commercial stuff that you've done because our typical commercial deal is going to a local lender and getting something on, for the audience that might be watching and not familiar, on a 515. Now, that just means that it's a 5-year balloon. So it's a mortgage that will balloon in 5 years. Total amount is due, but they'll amortize it as if it was a 15 or 20-year mortgage. And, with that, it allows you to refinance and experience cash flow without it just beating your brains out, right?
Yep.
So what have you enjoyed the most as far as financing options? Um, which one was your favorite loan to do? Was it your FHA where you lived in the 4 unit? Uh, are you enjoying the commercial loans? What's that like?
My favorite was the commercial loans, probably. Reason being, the FHA loan, I was doing so much research that I knew exactly how it would go. Now, submitting all the paperwork and documents is the biggest pain in the ass for any
Yeah.
loan. Um, the commercial loan is much more lax on that end, and I'll dive into the commercial loan in a second. But I also did a hard money loan, and that was a horrible experience. I did it with a company that was national. They were advertising an 8% interest rate on hard money, which is really good, as you would know. So I'm like, that's insane. Last minute, the day before closing, they're like, nope, interest rate's going to be this. And they just jacked it up like 3%, which 11% still isn't bad. But I had to submit more documentation to them than a normal loan. I was like, I would have just gotten a normal loan. So that was a pain. But the commercial loan was my favorite because I kind of figured it out myself. I didn't know where to go. No one steered me there. I just walked into the local commercial lender and was talking to them, and I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. They liked me, and they were willing to give me a shot. Not only that, they gave me 20% seller concessions. They said as long as the property appraised, good to go. So I wrote it up at 115 or 120 with $20,000 in seller's concessions, and we made it work. So I came out of pocket just very little.
And I think that a lot of people need to understand that there are still financing institutions that they don't discourage creativity. You know, I'm actually working with a bank right now that we have a package of properties that are coming up for their 5-year balloon. And Ryan, I know back in 2020, I'm sure you had a couple of these, but we had a 3.75 interest rate, and then we had a 4% interest rate, and these are now starting to balloon. So now those interest rates are coming up at 7.5. And thankfully, we didn't over leverage. So the amortization of the loans, the debt, and we're able to still refinance even at the interest rate that we're going to be at today. And our monthly note will actually drop by about $1,300. So it's really nice to do that and do it properly. But going back to your point about hard money, I think a lot of people they sit there and they tunnel vision on what's the cheapest rate, so they don't even understand that, those 8% loans, that's 8% APR, but they might be charging you, 8, 10 points on the loan. And a point is a full on percentage point of that loan. So if it's 8% APR, you're borrowing $100,000. All right, great. You're going to pay $8,000 over the course of a year in interest only. However, they don't care if you take that loan and you pay it back in 3 months because they charge you 8 to 10 points on top of it. So that's another $8 to 10,000 just in fees that they bury into that loan. And the other day, actually happens quite often. I'll get a call from an investor. They're like, "Yeah, Lee, on your hard money, what are you sitting at?" I'm like, "All right." So I give them the guidelines, and I'm like, "You're starting at 12% APR, and you're typically looking between 3 to 5 points in today's stuff." And they'll sit there and say, "Oh my God, no, that's way more expensive than these others." I said, "Go to them. I've got plenty of demand for my money, so it's okay." And then they come back. I literally had one come back last week, and they're like, "Hey, is there any way that we can still close this deal? But I need to close it in 3 days because this other lender, they ended up jacking up the rate, just like what you said. It was kind of like a bait and switch." And I told him, "Brother, I wish I could help you, but I don't close loans in 3 days from scratch to finish. We still have to get the appraisal and everything else." And they were still waiting for the appraisal to come in on their other loan, which I'll be honest, I suspect that they hadn't even ordered it at that point if they were trying to close in 3 days. But it's funny to sit there and have these conversations with other investors that you've seen the bullshit and you've kind of got your radar calibrated to where you're not necessarily looking for what's this lowest rate here. How easy is it to do business with you? Should be
Yep.
what a lot of the questions are.
The commercial lender, it was basically it's kind of ridiculous, honestly. You'd go in there. This was a small local place, so everyone listening probably couldn't use that. But I walked in, told them what I wanted, and I didn't even have to prove income. I told them how much I made, and I told them how much the property would make, and they were just like, "Okay," and basically gave me the money. It was that simple. So and the interest rate was a little higher. If I were to go with a conventional loan or something like that, it would have been a lower rate. I would have saved some money, but I'd rather pay more and just have ease of use. That's like it's
Yeah.
like saving you time and energy and stress, and it's worth it.
I think a lot of investors, when they start to really understand that it's okay to pay 8.5, 9% interest on a loan, whenever you can turn around and you reverse engineer your numbers and your offer to allow for that debt service. And for anybody watching that might not be familiar with it, more than likely, Ryan, not to put words in your mouth, but the loan type that you described is most likely a DSCR loan, debt service coverage ratio, to where they don't necessarily look at your income; they look at what's the property going to perform at, and will the property sustain itself. And that's where they go in there and they say, okay, well, if we know that that property will pay for the mortgage, these calculations that we have, such as maintenance, vacancy management, taxes, and insurance, if it'll do all that and break even, then that's a one globalization rate. So a lot of banks are doing that now. I will say that they're starting to tick up a bit. They're starting to get to that 1.25, and depending on your leverage position, some of them might want a 1.35 uh, as far as the debt service coverage ratio that they look for. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's great to see when somebody else like gets it and you understand that no, if you make it easy on me to do business, I've got business to do. You know. So what would you say is on the horizon? I know that you said, paying off your personal residence in the next, 12 months from the way that you've got your listings going right now in your business. Because I have to say, man, I see you out there. You've built a hell of a farm out there in the neighborhood. You've got a great presence out there. You're thought of well out there. So as that happens and as your business grows, you want to pay off your house. What would you say is kind of like your next curiosity or next interest for investing if it's not necessarily rentals for cash flow or something like that?
Extremely passive. I don't want to be involved in the investing. I want to be involved in doing deals and selling homes. I like it. Some people get burnt out from being a realtor, but I like it still. I still love helping people. I love the negotiations and the things I don't like the paperwork and the sending emails back and forth. I have an assistant to do that, so I get to do the fun stuff, in my opinion, and I like that part of the business. So basically, I want to make as much money as possible and just keep using that for vacations, improving my life, or just investing completely passively from here on
Yeah.
out, and hopefully be able to retire one day.
Well, let's speaking of, let's go ahead and I guess round it out with a couple hard hitting questions. What do you enjoy doing with your pastime or your free time?
Well, we live in paradise. It's really nice, and it's hard to have freedom when you have a toddler. So we're working on getting her into full time daycare, so maybe we can get some of our stressful day back. And then we really like just doing stuff. When we lived up north before we had the baby, we were hiking and going on little weekend trips. And now we have a cruise scheduled, so we're going to be doing cruises. We live so close to the cruise ports, so
Yeah.
we could do all that fun stuff. So just having fun and spending time with the family.
I've got to say, I think that's whenever I really developed even more passion for doing my hard money lending and my private funding that I do, because we were on a cruise and somebody reaches out and they hit me up for a loan. Literally, I underwrote it that morning before we even went to breakfast. Uh, did a couple of texts back and forth and secured the loan, got it all lined up. And whenever I got back, within 3 days, wired it, sent off the money. And I explained to my wife, I said, Kathy, I think I like this because I didn't have to open a single door. I didn't have to, to listen to a lot of the frustrations that realtors have right now. So that was that really kind of took my energy, or not my energy, but it took my attention and said, "Hey, there's something to this." So I respect that, that you're looking for that passive down the road whenever that time comes. Um,
Yeah.
what would you say? Are you a crypto guy, or do you think that through and through real estate's always going to have a space for your focus?
No, I hate crypto and I resent it because I had the opportunity to buy Bitcoin when it was $400 a coin, and
Ooh,
I passed on it because it sounded ridiculous. Well, you could get a computer and mine through this magical system and get these fake things. I'm like, this is stupid. Someone was explaining it to me, and I never did it. And now I'm the dumbass sitting here, and I don't have a ton of money because I didn't invest in Bitcoin. So yeah, no, you never know when it's going to crash. Like those pictures, what were they called? The tokens or whatever they
oh,
call them. They were selling,
NFTs,
yeah, NFTs. They were selling them for
non
hundreds.
fungible tokens. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they went down to nothing overnight. And I don't think that's necessarily going to happen with crypto, but I I don't know. I think the stock market is a safer bet.
I think that we're going to see some interesting things. Now, speaking of the stock market, just to round it out and keep it, on a financial tip, it was really interesting with, I think it Deep Slate that China had announced one of their AI companies now has an AI that instead of the $100 million that it took to train ChatGPT, they've trained Deep State for less than $6 million, and they don't need near the computing power that ChatGPT needs or these other more U.S. based AI models are. So it took a hell of a hit this today with some of these semiconductor companies. Nvidia. I didn't really watch to see where they landed, but it's really curious to see where technology, just in general, not just crypto, not just AI, but where that's driving, and some of these institutional buyers in the stock market, they're loading heavy into some of these spaces. So and while that's there, I feel like there's a lot more volatility than in sticks and bricks. So I agree with you that they definitely have a place for investment. Now, I'd probably be kicking myself too if I had thought to buy, Bitcoin at $400 a coin. Hell, I was thinking about buying it if it dipped to 12 over the past year, and it didn't. It got down to like 18, and then it just skyrocketed. So,
Yeah,
but you live, you love, you buy. Depends. It is what it is. So,
yeah. I don't
well, do you have
think it
any
hurts.
words of wisdom? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts to be slightly invested in that stuff. As long as you could afford to lose it. If you want to
Yes.
be safe and secure for the rest of your life, I say stock market or a different avenue. Real estate will always appreciate. So
Yeah.
I think those are the best two.
Well, and that's why I like the secured, the hard money lending, because at least I get to secure my investment with the sticks and the bricks. So if they mess up, then I'll take that, and my LPs or my limited partners, they get to then turn around and say, oh, okay, well, at least we got an asset out of it. Whew, we get to minimize, right? If a stock goes to zero, you're just ass out. What do you do? But
Yeah.
well, yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on tonight and just kind of sharing this yeah, deep sea. Thank you, Amber. Sharing your journey with us and what that looks like, and I'm excited to see where it goes for you. So I'm hoping that you come back on in a number of months, within next 5-6 months, kind of update us, see where things are changing for you, what the market's doing, and how your business is now growing and what's shifted for you. But yeah, is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with tonight? Any contact information, where to follow you, or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Just my name. I don't know if you can see it there, but I'll put it in the comments. Ryan Paolucci on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, and you could contact me there. My phone number's all over the place.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually
Words
put
of
this
wisdom.
into a
I say,
banner.
yeah, if
What's
you
that?
are, if you're investing in real estate, I say get your real estate license. Even if you don't use it, use it to browse the MLS. It's really helpful when it comes to networking. Because I'm licensed, I've met so many people that have helped me learn and elevate my investing game, even if it has nothing to do with the realtor side. So if you don't want to be a salesperson or sell houses to your friends and family, that's totally fine. But I definitely recommend being licensed, at least to get MLS access. You can negotiate directly with the agent, save yourself commission, and network and meet a lot of people.
Some
So,
great points too. Well, Ryan, I do appreciate you coming out tonight. And in the meantime, if there's anything that you ever need, just feel free to reach out. And we're going to go ahead and turn off the stream now, and we'll wind it all down. So, anybody else that's stuck with us all the way through, thank you all for watching. And please feel free to join into the school community, and let's keep growing. So, y'all have a great night.